planet is going to be making a very close pass to our planet very soon. And, to discuss this compelling evidence, I am going to have on Terral. He is a researcher and an expert on this evidence, and we'll be talking about what we can expect, what some of the signs are, and how we can take steps to try and survive. So let me get Terral on the line for you. Terral, can you hear me? Hello?
Hello, Nixie.
Fantastic. How are you doing today?
Great. How are you? Mic check. Am I coming in good?
Yes, I can hear you very, very good. Okay, so we did a show last week, and I really encourage everyone who missed that show, maybe go back and take a listen to that one first, because today I just kind of I don't want to have to go through the whole explanation of how our solar system is and everything. Once again, I mean, we'll go over it, of course, but because just the background information took so long last week, and there's a lot more information to get out. I don't want to, basically have a repeat of what we already talked about. So, obviously, so anyone who missed the first show, you may be a little behind on the learning curve, so to speak. So if you're having questions, if you're listening, or you feel like you're not caught up, really go back and listen to the other show first. And what I want to talk about is something that happened last week too. So if you want to explain a little bit about the trajectory of what this object is, and also how it's affecting the solar system. For example, this massive sun flare or solar flare that we had last week, and what that tells you, and what, if any, are the signs that we've already seen from Saturn.
Okay. Well, first of all, Ellie is still in the southern hemisphere. That's why we got the flare from the south side of the sun. And it worried me that it came this early in the timeline. I didn't expect that. And so that is a troubling sign, but hopefully we don't get another until later in the timeline. Saturn passed between the sun and Ellie and developed an extra ring, and also it caused a superstorm. So the Saturn had an event like we had with Japan, where its axis shifted, and where it had quakes, and then that showed up as a superstorm on the sun, on Saturn right now. Then on 7/7 coming up, then Ellie's going to pass between the sun and Saturn on July the 7th coming up. So we're watching Saturn for signs that Ellie's trying to wrestle polarity control from the sun. So if you would like me to, in 1 minute, I'll go down the timeline briefly and just do the major stuff so somebody can catch up.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, on the May 11th is the day that the Earth passed through the gravity trough connecting the two stars. That's the day we had the Japan quake. That's the day Earth axis shifted 4 inches, and the day Earth aquifers all shifted. On April 25th, that's the day that that we crossed Ellie orbit, and we got locked at 1.8 AU. 1 AU is 1 astronomical unit. It's about 93 million miles. So we've been locked in orbit at about 170 million miles since April the 25th until today, and that's going to continue until after the alignment. At the alignment on July the 7th, we're still 1.74 AU away. So you see, we're like those two sailboats heading in the same direction. We're on the outside, Ellie's on the inside, and Ellie's not able to get any closer. The next key date is, we'll skip down to September 11th. That's the day of perigee. That's the day that Ellie is nearest the sun. It's the day that Ellie passes from the southern hemisphere to the northern hemisphere. It's the day of maximum velocity. The next important day is September 26th, very important day. The reason the Russians think this object is controlled is because Ellie appears to be flying through a 9/11 window. That allows Ellie and the Earth to be both on the celestial plane on September the 26th. That places Ellie in perfect position to break the magnetic portals connecting the sun and the Earth together and to wrestle polarity control from the sun. After that, the next important day is November 22nd, where we have another alignment like 3/11 of this year with the Japan quake, except for this time, Ellie's only about half the distance of the sun away. So by then, the problem is that Earth magma is going to be super hot, and we can have Japan-like events all over the planet.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I want to mention, I know we did mention this on the last show as well, but because you mentioned it, and it was a question I had last time, and certainly I'm sure other people will have that because of what you're saying. So if this planet tries to, wrestle control from the sun, is it possible that, I mean, I understand the sun is, gigantic, so I don't think it will be able to, but just to, kind of calm everyone, do you think it will be able to wrestle the Earth from its orbit into its own orbit, or send us, spinning off?
No, the sun is much too large. Ellie's been trying to wrestle polarity control from the sun since 2004, whenever those magnetic portals were connected to us. That's the reason that we've had the magnetic problems with the animal deaths and things.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's going to be magnified on October the 17th, when Ellie is at the nearest point of the encounter, and the dwarf star is actually passing in front of us. So there's connected to this object is a deep V-shaped gravity well. And so Earth is going to be trying to fall into that. And Ellie's going to have polarity control for about 10 days from the 26th onward, you see, leading up to this event. So Ellie's getting closer and closer to us as that's happening. But Ellie's going to go on by, and the sun is going to wrestle polarity control back and overcompensate. The sun's very, very large. And so I see no tail, as far as like a comet has a tail associated with this. There can be an asteroid belt, but I'm not concerned about impact with anything. I'm more concerned about the gravitational effect and the magnetic effect, what's going to happen. Then in the spring, I expect to have a near orbit. In other words, we're going to have a straight orbit. The sun's going to overcompensate for Ellie trying to pull us out, and the sun's going to snatch us back. And so that, like a straight line, rather than a round elliptical orbit, we're going to have a straight orbit for the spring, and then we're going to have a wide orbit in the summer because of that overcompensation. Because the sun is going to be overcompensating for what Ellie's trying to do. So if you want to imagine, it's like the sun's having a arm wrestling contest with this other star. And it's that wrestling contest that is causing the magnetic poles to migrate, because Ellie's trying to do one thing to us, and the sun is trying to stand us back up, you see. Sure. So that's what's going on with the magnetic poles. And the magnetic north is being affected more than the magnetic south, but all of that is caused by the sun reacting to what this star is doing to us, you see.
And another question I have, too, is if there is some compensation, overcompensation, if there's some even slight change in the Earth's orbit, would that or could that possibly throw us out of the so-called Goldilocks zone?
The Earth is definitely going to be moving out of orbit, but then there's going to be a compensation period that's going to last for more than a year as we gradually, our relationship with the sun is reestablished. Then the pressure waves that are coming off the sun is going to equalize everything. The sun, the equilibrium that the sun has with the Earth is going to take over, and we're going to go back to an orbit very similar to what we have now. It's possible that we could have a shorter year, in other words, a number of days, back to 360. That's possible, but there's just no way of knowing yet.
Okay, because yeah, if we get too close or too far, well, that's a problem. You know what I mean? So
right.
that would be something I'd be concerned about.
Ellie is going to pull us out of orbit on a long orbit, but you see we're going to be moving faster ahead in orbit, but we're going to travel a longer distance. And so that's going to make up for some of that compensation. So the fast orbit's going to be made up with the longer distance traveled, so there's going to be an equilibrium effect. There's a balancing effect. So, you see what I mean? So we could end up with the same amount of time we have now. Some of the models say that we're going to have a shorter year, and so there's too many variables to really know.
Right, and something like that, I can't even imagine what the gravitational effects would be if we started, going in a different spin that we did before, or even from the pole that Ellie would be exerting. Would that have a lot of gravitational effects on the planet? Would it be lighter or heavier possibly?
No, you're much too close to the Earth. You're going to be controlled gravitationally by the Earth because of your proximity. So it's the square of the distance. You would have to get pretty far away from the Earth for the star to affect you personally gravitationally. But it's going to affect the Earth gravitationally because of the massive gravity well. That's the reason Greenland had sunrise 2 days early, is because of the gravity well that's approaching with this object. But you personally know that there's no way that this object can wrestle you away from this Earth. You're much too close to the Earth.
Okay, and another thing I wanted to talk about, I don't think we mentioned this before, but if you go to the NASA JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, they have like a little animation there, and anyone can go and look. It's pretty good tool to kind of look at. It's fun, but they show you the trajectories of comets, and you can go forward in time, and I think back in time as well. But the thing I noticed about what they're calling comet L&N, and I'll put that in quotes since it's definitely up for debate, is that it has this bizarre kind of, once it gets into the inner part of our solar system, instead of being like an oval or, a circle like you would expect a trajectory to be, like all the other trajectories are, this one has like a couple right angles in it, as though it's just, slamming on the brakes and making a turn. And it doesn't, it doesn't look that impressive. When you're, say, looking at it, it looks like a little bend and then, like a little tiny angles. But, it seems like that is not like a real orbit. It seems like that's either they don't know the trajectory and they're trying to compensate for something else, or it's basically not true. And I don't think it always looked like that either, did it?
If you run the JPL again and you go day by day and you look really closely, you'll see the orbit does not follow that trajectory path. It's actually following a line that's outside of it. It is on a round elliptical orbit the way that it should be. If you look real close, you'll see that those are just reference markers for that's showing the scientists the point. Those are just reference markers for this orbit. So if you draw a line between them, you'll see how they intersect. Mm-hmm. And if you follow Ellie coming in, you'll see that Ellie is actually on the outside of those lines. It's not following them.
I kind of noticed that it was quite a space away from it. My question is are they actually their astronomical units that they're putting in the corner there? Are they judging that from the line or from the planet? Is there? I mean, of course, there might not be any way to know, because it seems like there's something going on. They haven't published any pictures of this comet, and the reason was that it wasn't spectacular enough or something. That doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me. People who are interested in astronomy and these kinds of things, they're interested in what it looks like. It doesn't have to be, I don't know, the Judy Garland of space or whatever, some big spectacular thing. So I don't understand why they wouldn't publish a picture of it. And then secondly, I wanted to talk a little bit about this kind of strange video that came out from NASA. What was it, yesterday or the day before yesterday?
Right.
It's called the NASA preparedness video. And apparently it was sent out to NASA employees, and it wasn't necessarily meant for the general public. Am I getting that right? Yes.
Yeah, that's brought up in my threat assessment video, ELE threat assessment video. If you go to my YouTube channel, then there's a link there. You can go see it.
Mm-hmm. And it says, make sure you have, a good supply of food and water to last you in case there's some kind of catastrophe or event, and, of course, then they point to terrorism. And then so I'm thinking to myself, well, sure, but why is NASA putting out a video about terrorism? That's kind of out of their realm. And then, they mentioned certain areas specifically. So I thought that, too, was a little weird. And, yeah, definitely, I encourage everyone to go to Terral's YouTube channel. It's TERRAL03, and take a look at some of these videos, and especially the most recent one. And you'll be able to see it's called the NASA preparedness video. You can Google it, and I'm sure it will come up, and you'll be able to watch it. I was really kind of surprised by that. And so what I want to talk about, too, is a little bit about how we know that this isn't, just a comet like they claim, and a rather boring one, I guess. I mean, I don't know why they wouldn't publish a picture of it, but why we know that this is probably not a comet, but something else, and that why specifically we think it's a brown dwarf planet.
Okay, first of all, those numbers you see generated for the distances are calculated by a supercomputer. So it's not like they're using this diagram for that. They don't put out pictures on it. There's largely a media blackout on this Elenin topic, in case you didn't notice.
Yeah.
So they're just not giving a lot of information about it. And then the reason we know this is not a comet is because of many reasons. Number one, if this was truly a comet approaching perigee position, then it would be gaining speed into the hundreds of thousands or even millions of miles an hour. This one is the average speed from June the 27th until August the 3rd is 62,500 miles an hour, which is planetary speed. The comets, they shed their outer skin, they outgas. They give all kinds of signs saying I'm a comet because they're mostly ice. And this object is not doing that. It's coming in like a brick. It's not changing its mass. It's flying through a 9/11 window at planetary speed. And it's been locked in orbit with our planet, and now it's getting ready to match speed with our planet. And what appears like, if the sun is the daddy and the Earth is the daughter, then this planet appears to be corking the Earth. And so that it breaks the cords that are connecting the father and the daughter, and this star it's already connected its portals as if betrothing us, you see. And then the matrimony part is coming up, the marriage through this 10-day period that the magnetic portals between the Earth and the sun are broken, and we're getting all of our magnetism directly through this other star. See, so there's a lot going on here with the 9/11 perigee, with the Elenin name. When you turn Elenin around, you got 9/11, you see, N-I-N-E-L-E. And so with all the symbolism and the disinformation campaign put out by our NASA and the Department of Defense is what led me to this investigation in the first place. And the code names, we're living in an ELE movie, and the government is hiding that from everybody. And it's people like in our research group that are trying to wake people up to it, and we're an extreme minority, and we're having a difficult time because of all the disinformation that's out there, you see.
And I do want to point out to everyone, too, is that, this isn't just some idea that you've come up with on your own with no supporting evidence or verification from anyone else. I do want to point out that you're part of a group, and there are a lot of people in this group, and of course some amateur or hobbyist astronomers, and Terral and them they're working together to kind of get information and kind of verify each other on what they're seeing from where, and using that as kind of hypothesis on what this actually is. So I do want to say, this isn't some idea that you came up with on your own and is not verified by anyone else. There's quite a lot of talk out there on the internet, and even other groups of people who are kind of getting together and trying to figure out what this is. And one thing I wanted to ask too is that I guess it's hard to see except for in infrared, and that's because from what I understand is that a brown dwarf is very cold, and it's also giving off like a gas. And I'm wondering if you could explain a little bit about why you believe that it's a brown dwarf and maybe not some other type of star or planet or whatever, especially for those of us who aren't, real well-versed in astronomy. And what are some of the markers that you see with this when you guys are seeing it in the sky that would lead you to believe that it is a brown dwarf?
Okay, when you run the timeline backwards, then you see other alignments. And Minster Amabasic, in his paper, took it back to 1965, and he found a lot of events connected with this object. That includes February 27, 2010 with a Chile quake and the Earth axis shifting, and again on 3/11 this year with a Japan quake. So we see a pattern of seismicity, which tells us that this object has great mass. Secondly, this thing has great mass, and it's difficult to see. We have the coordinates. We aim our telescopes out there, and it's very, very difficult to see. Now, that means the classification of this object can only be about a handful of things. That is a brown dwarf, a black dwarf, a neutron star, or some type of black hole anomaly that maybe nobody's discovered yet. And so we're looking at the possibility of a brown dwarf because of the release of photons. The photon warning came out in 2010 from NASA, and the Russians warning about the same thing. The reason that the sun appears to be brighter to a lot of people today is because extra photons, those clouds, are coming from this star. That it's a failed star that never ignited, but it still releases the photons just like our sun, you see. And so the sun has an extra source. So the sun has a way of dealing with its own photons. It grows and it shrinks according to the amount of photons that are being released internally. But now we have the warning from NASA about an external source, and they don't know what it is. They think that we're orbiting through a photon cloud, when actually it's because of this approaching dwarf star. So that's another piece of the puzzle that tells us that this is a dwarf star rather than what they're saying. It's definitely not a comet, because a comet could be made of ice. The ice is less dense than water. And in order for this to be a comet, then it would have to be larger than the size of Jupiter, and it would be easy to see.
Right.
Right? And so whenever you add it all together and look at all the evidence, then this must be a high-density dwarf-type object. It just must be.
And one more, well, a couple more questions, I guess, before we get into what people need to do to kind of prepare, because that's something I definitely want to go over tonight. But, and this will probably be the most ridiculous question of the night, and it obviously comes from me. But I'm wondering, if this thing is releasing all these photons and everything, and that's kind of how our sun works, because this is like a failed sun. Is that what a brown dwarf is, in a sense?
Right. That's what we believe this one is. There are other ways to make dwarf stars after another star dies, but we think this is a failed star. The difference would be that our sun, when it was a giant cloud of dust, and then it collapsed upon itself, and if it has sufficient mass, then it ignites. Well, as soon as the sun ignites, then it stops the implosion process, you see? So you don't have a high-density object. With a failed star, that implosion process continues until it squeezes out all the empty space between, in the atoms themselves. So all the empty space is pushed out, and they're forced together. That's what makes a high-density dwarf star. It usually begins as does begin as a white dwarf, and then as it releases the outer skin, the photons are continuously released. And so as they're released, the outer skin is shed. And then that makes it a higher density object because the core is the highest density. So this is apparently a very old dwarf star that is transitioning from a brown and maybe even to a black dwarf status.
And with it coming so close to our sun, it's not possible, I wouldn't imagine, and here's the ridiculous question, but I just want to ask, it wouldn't be possible for our sun to ignite it or have some effect on it, or would the photons actually be feeding our sun, and maybe that's what's going to be causing these future solar flares?
Well, the solar flares are drawn out gravitationally because remember that these two stars are connected. So there's an umbilical cord connected to the sun. When that umbilical cord reaches up towards the equator of the sun, near perigee, you see, that's when the solar storms are going to begin coming right out of the side of the sun.
Okay. All right, but it's not, as far as the photons coming off, that's not going to have any effect.
Oh, the first part of your question is it going to ignite? We think that this object is going to ignite. It must be at Mercury orbit in order to do that. In other words, it doesn't have its own spark source. But whenever it's near the sun and flying right through the solar radiation at Mercury orbit, look how hot Mercury is. Then the ice cube the ice cube effect is going to be overcome, and this object we believe is going to ignite to become our second sun. That's why we have the conditioning stories about Betelgeuse, the supernovas, the second suns, all that stuff. But then after Ellie comes on around and leaves Mercury orbit, we expect that the second sun is going to go out again. So as it leaves the influence of the solar, where the solar rays are high density, right near the sun, as it leaves that, then the photon cloud will go out, and then it'll be similar to what you have right now. I mean, exactly like you have now. So there's a period of perhaps 2 months that this object will be visible as a second sun.
And then, of course, my follow-up to that would be, if something like that were to happen, now when these ignite, do they stay about the same mass, or do they expand? I mean, is it possible that it would explode into kind of a bigger mass, and then that would be big trouble for us, right?
No, there's not a chance of that, because this object completely imploded upon itself, so all that is tight matter on the inside. The only reactive matter is going to be on the outside. Okay. It's much too high density. You cannot break this thing. There's nothing in this universe except for God that can break this thing open. It's a hard nut to crack. There's no way it's going to break open. Okay,
well, that's good to know. Yeah, because that, things like that, I was just wondering about, they kind of concern me a little bit. And, what I want to talk about now, too, is, what people can do to prepare, because like we were saying on the last show, by the time you walk outside your door and you see it there in the sky, it's probably too late, as far as with the naked eye or, with a good pair of binoculars. By then, you probably are already in serious trouble. So, what are some of the things that people can do to prepare? I've heard of these bug-out bags, these bags that you can grab and go if you need to, and explain a little bit about what those bags are and what maybe you should have in them, what kind of food supply someone might need.
Okay, we could do 3 shows on that. Well, you're right. This thing's going to become visible between September the 1st and the 14th, and by the time you can see it, it's much, much too late to prepare. The reason is because the solar storm threat is far sooner than you can see this thing. And so if you look at my recent video, then you'll see that we have a timeline and we have safety windows, and that safety window extends back to August the 1st. And so people that are heading for their bug-out cavern, you must be going towards a cavern with water with your survival group, then August the 1st is the day that you should be looking at. That gives you a week or 2 safety window. If you have to drive 1,000 miles or you have a lot of stops to make, then you may want to be one of those early birds that leave in July. And if you live in the Ozarks, of course, then maybe you can leave a little bit later. So there's no one answer for everybody. It depends on your situation. It's that ELE solar threat that is of paramount importance. That's what's going to affect you first. And we expect the communication and power grid to go down during the month of September. We don't know if it's going to be on the 1st or it's near the end, but that power grid is going to go down, and we believe that it's going to be in September. So you obviously, by the time you see it, the power grid could go down. And if you have a lot of preparations to make and a long way to go, there's no way that you're going to be able to do that. As far as preparations of what you need, then we're looking at a typical survival scenario, but with the inclusion of the solar storm threat, the pole shift threat, and the Earth magma seismic threat. So those are the 3 things that are pointed out and detailed in that threat assessment video that was just released today. The differences in the regular, so you need your, it depends on how much resources you have. If you have lots and lots of money, then there's one answer, and if you have limited resources, there's another. So for people that have lots of resources, you'd want to get a travel trailer, solar power set up. You want to have your tents, a large tent, and then small tent, and your vehicle should have a topper on it, so you can use that as a shelter. So you have multiple layers of environment, you see, if you see what I'm talking about. Then food, you're looking at being in this cavern for up to 4 months. And then you need seeds on the other side, because when you come out, the world is going to be unrecognizable. And so you need enough food to carry you through that first growing period. And so we're talking about a considerable amount of food. You cannot survive this thing in a bunker behind your house, because the outside temperatures can easily reach 180, 200 degrees for an extended period, particularly if you're in the southern hemisphere, because the southern hemisphere is going to have way, way worse effect from LA than the northern hemisphere, because we're going to be tipped backwards from the sun for about 10 days. So we'll have night for about 10 days, but the solar effect in the southern hemisphere is just going to be tremendous in comparison. So as far as your bug out bag, then it's typical of what you would have in a normal survival situation. You know, I have everything in mind, from everything down to duct tape and all kinds of line, fish hooks, compass, you know, the regular typical things that you would need in case you get separated from your travel trailer and everything else, with one tent, you know, and things like that, with your canteen. In case you're separated from your travel trailer for any reason, that you can grab your bag and that you can survive for a period of days.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I do want to mention, you know, my switchboard again is just lighting up. You would not believe it, call after call after. But in any case, I just want to let everyone know that I do apologize, but I'm not taking calls on this particular show today because of the information that we're trying to get out. And we did take a few calls last time, and we ended up just running out of time. And I really want to try and just stick to some of the information here. Although, you know, again, possibly in the future, you know, I may do a show, and you know, if people want to call in and you know, just kind of voice opinions, you know, I can do that. And poor Charlie's already so swamped, I wouldn't, you know, want to ask him to come back for that. And you know, but you know, maybe I can set something up at a future date for people to call in and just kind of tell me what they're thinking, especially because the closer we get to the fall, you know, we're going to see a lot more signs of this thing, and you know, I think by then we'll have a lot more people kind of taking a look outside and saying what's going on. You know, another thing that I wanted to talk about a little bit is that, you know, seeds are a good thing to have, and you know, for any reason, you know, just to have them, but to make sure that if you're going to get seeds for survivalist purposes, that you'll want to get what's called heirloom seeds. And that's because you may or may not know, some of you out there, that a lot of the seeds now are kind of genetically modified or genetically engineered by Monsanto, among others. And I've been, you know, trying to do a show on that, and I have someone who does want to come on to talk about that in the future, but they are all booked up at the moment. So, you know, I'm hoping, you know, to do a show on that in the future, although, you know, I think that maybe, you know, as we start learning more and more about Ellie, that these, you know, these kinds of shows might end up being more important in the long run. So, you know, we're going to wait and see on that. But I do want to make mention that if you're going to bring seeds, they should be heirloom seeds. Otherwise, I don't think that they can reproduce the following year. I think they're only good for like 1 year, 1 season. And, you know, another thing I want to talk about is you know, the FEMA camps. You know, there's been a lot of talk about, you know, these FEMA death camps, and you know, there's a lot of buzz about these large coffins that they've been stockpiling, and I guess, you know, FEMA has recently been ordering, you know, an unusual supply of food and rations. But my question is, you know, do you think that maybe these camps will be, you know, the government's way of setting up, you know, survival camps, like what you're talking about, like maybe non-violent, malevolent, or do you think that, you know, there are indicators that point to these camps being more sinister, as a lot of people think?
Sinister, absolutely. What you're looking at is, if you review history, you're going to see that Rothschild financed Hitler to do the same exact thing. We're following in Hitler's footsteps, by the way. He created these camps, and then he put Jews in them. And the undesirables are going to be the revolutionaries, the people like are in our group. Those are the ones that are the red dotters, if you've heard of the red listers.
No.
Those are, yeah, we're the ones that are the troublemakers for the New World Order. You see, so after Ellie goes by, the plan is to take their Blackwater type mercs and to round us up, put us in the FEMA camps. And what Hitler did is he took the Jews and he loaded them up into rail cars. All of these FEMA camps, every one of them are accessed by rail cars.
Really?
Yes, and what he did was he piled them in there, and then he dumped lye on them, and he turned them into fertilizer. And he made grooves in the bottom of the cars to catch the gold teeth and stuff. And then the people were shoveled out into mountains to feed his new race of people for his New World Order. Wow. So Obama and Bush and the people running our government, they're the modern-day Hitlers. And Rothschild, the House of Rothschild, is the same people that's financing them and giving them their orders for their New World Order.
Wow. And what are now this Rothschild? Who is? Because I haven't heard of him before. Who is that exactly?
The House of Rothschild is the people that killed Abraham Lincoln. They're the people that killed John F. Kennedy for the same reason, because he was trying to give currency, the currency back to the people, you know, a United States-based currency. Each time that happens, then Rothschild kills him. He's been in control of our Secret Service from day one. That's one of the reasons the presidents, they can't come out and tell you the truth. And they're all controlled because they know that they'll suffer the same fate. The reason that we invaded Libya was for the same reason, is because they were getting ready to come out with a Libyan currency that was gold-based. And the United States owed Gaddafi a whole bunch of money. And so the United States, the UK, NATO, the IMF, that's all Rothschild lapdogs. And so they invaded Libya in order to install the Rothschild Central Bank, which is just like the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is owned by the House of Rothschild.
Right,
Rockefellers.
based on the gold standard.
No, that's fiat. It was taken off. That's the way that Rothschild siphoned off our wealth. Same way he did to Germany, the same way he's doing to the rest of the nations on Earth. And once he siphons off your wealth, you see he's running us into depression. Once he siphons off all your wealth and he's happy with that, then he's going to lead you to World War III, just like he did World War II, and just like he did World War I. History is repeating itself, and it's the House of Rothschild that's the head of the snake that's beguiling the world right now.
Wow. Yeah, and you know, we are in a bit of an economic fix. As you know, some of you may know, I did do a show about hyperinflation and the debt ceiling, and we're in a bit of a pickle. You know, they refused to vote on this raising the limit for the debt ceiling, and now China, who we have borrowed quite a bit of money from, has stated, I think yesterday or the day before yesterday, that they are considering us to be currently right now defaulting on our loans because of our inability to get our ducks in a row, basically. So it's a little worrisome, and I'm concerned that if we don't do something, that there's a real good possibility that we're going to see the stock market plummet and maybe even bottom out. And for those of you that saw that, there's a movie on HBO, Too Big to Fail, about what had happened in the banking system. It was really great, and at one point, the guy who plays Timothy Geithner said, I can't believe that people are walking around on the street like, it's just another day and everything's about to collapse around them, and they don't even know it.
There's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do to fix this.
Right.
The United States is over $200 trillion in debt,
right,
and going towards $300 trillion in debt. And the Federal Reserve continues to print out all that the worthless paper and putting the debt on the back of the American people. And so just the unfunded liabilities is over $114 trillion. That's over $1 million per taxpayer. There's no way that's ever going to be paid, and everybody knows it. And to say that we borrowed money from China is kind of ridiculous because, for example, the back door to the Fed is wide open to people like J.P. Morgan, who's using the back door to finance their the silver short position. You see, so you've already got QE infinity going, and it's not just J.P. Morgan; it's the whole world. They're printing trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars and just handing it out to everybody. It's destroying the American dollar.
Economically, and it makes me wonder sometimes if we just can't even work together anymore, or at least the folks in Washington. I know that we can. I don't have problems with my neighbors or other people, people you work with or anyone, but it seems like for whatever reason, they can't stop fighting. It's amazing. But I want to get back to the topic too, and I want to talk about now. You've talked a little bit about some survival groups, and for those of you out there that would be interested in looking for a survival group, there are some websites you can go to, and there are some that are forming. And I know you said, the Ozarks is a good place to go. Are there any other places that you think that would be safe to go to, or is that pretty much the one that you would put your money on?
Well, divide the United States into three parts: from the Mississippi the Mississippi going east and the Rocky Mountains going west, and then the central United States. Everything east of the Mississippi is not safe. It is not safe. There's far too many nuclear power plants, and whenever the New Madrid goes, then the fault system running through the Appalachian Mountains is going to unlock. When it unlocks and Ellie has all that magma pushed up through the fault, then it's going to be super active, and those power plants are going to melt down. The super caldera out west is going to blow. The ocean's going to rush in over California, and it's going to become a giant inland sea. That area is not safe. The only safe place to go is the central United States. Now, you can take your pick. I want to be farther south, so I'm downwind of the desert and not downwind of another power plant. So for that reason, we've selected the Ozarks. The Ozarks has plenty of caverns, thousands of caverns. It has plenty of water. It's up on the plateau. It's on a stable plate that has not moved. It is not going to move. So we have 2 power plants that affect us in Arkansas, but they're on stable plates. We're also surrounded by elites. We have FEMA camps near us, see, because this is the safe zone.
Oh.
And so I encourage, see, we've embedded right in between them.
Oh, dear.
But that's where you want to be.
Well,
you want to be near your enemy because this is a safe zone. Everyone that can make it needs to go to the Ozarks, for sure. The reason is the overarching strategy is to become a hard target. So when Blackwater mercs emerge from their bunkers, we want to be a hard target. So they want to negotiate with us rather than trying to round us up, you see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you know, really, you know, having some of these things like we had talked about, like, you know, food for, you know, even, you know, up until a year to feed yourself and your family, it's a really good idea for everyone. I mean, we all kind of saw the disaster and the aftermath that was Katrina. And, you know, a lot of people can point to different reasons why they think that went so terribly wrong as opposed to, you know, other FEMA excursions and, you know, things like that. I think that while maybe some of those are valid, I think a lot of people and their ideas about why the people had such a hard time getting help in Katrina, I think some of that is race-based. I think I'm sure, you know, probably not all of it. I know, you know, in disasters and things there are generally you know, some incidents. But I think that that the main fault was on FEMA. They're not being able to get to people. We were offered help from a lot of different countries. Even Cuba offered to help us. Cuba, hey, you know, they said, hey, I know you don't like us, but we could send a boat over, man. Are you guys all right? I mean, they were watching the news too, and they probably couldn't believe it. And, you know, of course, you know, no, we don't want your help, Cuba, you know, but, I mean, hey, you know, there's a point when you take the help you can get. But, you know, I think that that it was a massive, just epic fail on their part, and you can't count on in any kind of disaster that someone is going to be there to save you. And so I think that a lot of times you should have some of these things on hand just in case there is a disaster. And you know, you can't always expect that someone's going to come to your rescue because, you know, there are cases, you know, throughout history where, you know, there's been catastrophes so large that, you know, nobody was able to come to the rescue, not for a very long time.
I think I can wrap that up for you pretty quickly. FEMA is an extension of the continuity of government plan put out by the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, and the Bilderbergs, which is the shadow government that's running our government. Okay, once you see that picture, if you read None Dare Call It Conspiracy by Gary Allen, then he'll explain it to you. Then once you see that picture, you realize that FEMA is working for the shadow government. They're not interested in helping the people at all. That they have a plan to put you in a FEMA camp, and that they have their continuity of government plan is the takeover of this country by the elite, is exactly what it is. And that's why we have to fight them. That's the reason there was no response in FEMA. They don't care about the people. They're taking orders from the shadow government.
And so what they want to do is make it more like the old kind of, what was it, the feudal system, I think, where, you know, there is the upper crust living in their castle and then, you know, the rest of us in the dirt, you know, help on being oppressed, right? So, yeah, I think, you know, and something like that, a situation like that, is a good opportunity for people who think like that to try and, you know, make a power grab and try and, you know, control other people, and if they have the resources and the money, they might just try to make the world the way that they think it should be, which may not actually fall in line with the way most of us think it should be. So, you know, it's a good idea to be prepared, and even if there was some, you know, real big disaster when this thing swings by, which I imagine there would be, to, you know, kind of be leery if they're trying to round people up. You know, I would be concerned about it for sure. But you know, there are people who are obviously going to make the argument, well, they're just trying to save us. You know, they're trying to help us, and you know, it's kind of, you know, you want to believe that someone's there to help, and you do. You want to believe, oh, they've come to help us. We're rescued. But, you know, sometimes maybe you just have to rescue yourself. I'd be a little bit leery about anybody that comes telling you that, you know, they're here to rescue you.
Right. And the FEMA operation is an extension of Rothschild / Rockefeller / Gates eugenics. So you can see by their response down there in Louisiana that what they were really doing is controlling the population rather than trying to save people. When you look at FEMA and what they do, you're going to realize they're putting people in trailers that aren't safe.
Right.
You're going to see a pattern of population control. Not that they're trying to help you, but that they're actually trying to kill you.
Yeah, I remember seeing a special about that trailers. It was pretty interesting, to say the least. But yeah, and you know, we've had already when Ellie lined up the last time on March 11th. That's when we had that gigantic earthquake in Japan, 9.0. Now, that wasn't as close as it's going to be. So, you know, when this thing gets closer, now you're saying that the aquifer is going to shift. Is that going to, I mean, is the actual face of the planet going to be redefined, basically?
Yes, it's terraformed. You have a shifting of the aquifer still because you have two stars in proximity to the Earth. So the aquifers are still shifting, and that's the reason you have sinkholes around the world forming right now. And that is going to get worse and worse and worse.
Yeah, I've heard more than I ever have about sinkholes, and I mentioned that last time. I keep hearing about it, about a new sinkhole forming here and there. And I'm not talking, you know, a little kind of, you know, 3-foot hole in somebody's backyard. These things are enormous.
Right, and that's going to continue to get worse and worse. And after the alignment of 1122, Earth aquifers are going to have a major shift around the world. This other star is going to be so close to us that it's the last time on 311 when the Earth aquifer shifted, then this thing was over 2 distance of the sun away. And on this alignment coming up, it's only going to be half the distance of the sun away.
Wow. Now, and of course, you know, to us here on top of what the Earth's crust, I think they call it, you know, we're just going to feel a lot of rumbling, basically. I mean, you know, it'll be a lot of shaking and quaking.
So it's going to depend, because if you're on a stable plate like we are on the Ozarks, then it's going to be minimal. You'll get some rumbling, but it's going to be minimal. But whenever you're over on the Appalachian side and those faults unlock, they're going to become active, and that's going to shake the heck out of that entire mountain range, all the way up to New England, all the way down to Georgia.
I mean, you know, and maybe even, you know, form new mountain ranges. I mean, I think, you know, anything would be possible if the aquifer were, you know, shifting around like that.
Well, we're talking about a terraforming of the planet. So you're going to have, people are talking about Lemuria, the ancient continent out in the Pacific Ocean. They're talking about that rising again. There's areas out there where the sea is rising 16 feet a day right now because of the approach of this star. And so we're going to see land masses pop up, and we're going to see land masses go underwater. The entire world is about to be changed.
Yeah, and I keep hearing that Japan is slowly sinking. Have you heard anything about this?
Yeah, that's been predicted by Dutch Sense since a few days after the quakes, because they kept having 6.0s. It looks like the north half of Japan is going to sink into the ocean.
Wow, that's pretty scary. But yeah, there's some really compelling evidence out there, and I know that people have seen it on infrared, and I know that there are some pictures that some of your friends have taken that have not been published yet, but that are on their way to being published. And you know, I know you probably don't know when, but you know, when they do go out there, I hope that, you know, all of you listening do keep this in mind and check over the next couple weeks and see if you can find new pictures. I assume these are infrared pictures that we're talking about. Do you know, Terral?
Well, there are pictures taken that will not be published because the people that have them are very much afraid of everybody waking up and destroying our own survival strategy. We have another person that is spending $30,000 for space, for time in an observatory to get us these pictures. Unfortunately, right now, the moon is in the way. So you need light from a dominant star projecting behind the gravity well in order to see this thing. With light shining from the sun, the moon on this side, it's impossible. It's impossible to see it. So we need the moon to pass on by, and then our window of opportunity is shrinking in July. And so I hope to be able to get some pictures to be able to help people wake up, but the chances of that seem to be more unlikely every day.
Okay, yeah, because it would cause a worldwide panic, really, you know, especially with the internet. Things, you know, go around the world in a matter of seconds. And so, yeah, I could see there would be some concern about that and about, you know, people suddenly pulling food off the shelves, you know, months and months and months early, and yeah, it would be a panic.
But if everybody woke up right now, if everybody in the world heard your show and everybody believed you, then everyone would run to the stores and empty them, and no one would be able, you know, these people listening probably would not be able to survive. And so we're sending the message out to everyone, but only a few are going to survive. There's just not enough food in the world for everybody to survive.
Yeah, and really, you know, if not enough room, if everyone, you know, in North America moved to, you know, the certain section of the plate, the stable plate, there wouldn't be enough room. I mean, I don't think you could fit everyone there.
No.
I don't even think it's possible for everyone to go there. You know, I mean, it's unfortunate. Hopefully, everybody does find a safe place, and you know, there aren't, you know, too many casualties or serious problems. But you know, if something like that is floating by the planet, I don't think that that'll be the case. I think we'll see a real alarming number of population decrease.
Absolutely. So the signs we're looking for towards the end of, we're looking for the Saturn sign 77, 2011, but then the AU number, that 1.8 AU number that we're locked in right now, that number is going to begin coming down the end of July, and that's whenever the Earth is going to begin reacting violently. So every volcano on Earth is going to begin erupting, and so that's your sign that you need to make a move and use that safety window that's still open for you August the 1st. Now, by the time you get to the middle of August, that safety window is going to close, and then anything can happen. We've got dams, the warnings of dams that are going to break anytime up in the Midwest. And that's going to dump even more water on the Midwest for that liquefaction effect whenever the new Madrid kicks off, you see. And so if you're caught on the wrong side of the Midwest, whenever those dams break and whenever those roads go out, then you're not going to be able to get across into the safe zone. And so you have to be very careful. Watch for the signs, and then you have to get yourself together, get all your supplies. You need 1 year's worth of food per person. And then get over to the Ozarks, and there's information in our survival video on how to join us over there.
Yeah, and I encourage people to check it out, and definitely, yeah, watch for the signs. And, you know, keep your eyes and ears open. It may not be hitting, you know, all the news channels, so to say, you know, so to speak, or the newspapers. But there are things you can look for here and, you know, beyond our great planet that, you know, will lead you to the evidence that, you know, there very probably is something coming through this system that's very, very big. And I think with that, Terrell, I'm going to have to let you go. I'm going to keep you on the line, though, until I sign off for the show, just because, you know, last time I had so many problems, and, you know, when I signed you out, you know, it signed me out too. I'm not sure why, but in any case, I'm gonna if you wouldn't mind holding on for a second while I do my little outro here and throw on my music, and after my music's over, I'm gonna hang everybody up. And, you know, I just want to, you know, tell you thank you so much for coming on the show, you know, helping wake people up about this and give them the compelling evidence regarding Elenin. And, you know, again, you can watch Terrell's videos and see his research on YouTube, Terral03. Go check him out. Do your own investigation. You know, don't just believe, you know, what we're saying. And, you know, let me know what you think, too. You can post a comment on my homepage here at blogtalkradio.com/NixieLaRue. And another thing I want to mention really quick is I saw this really great trailer the other day for a movie that's going to be coming out. It's called Melancholia. Now, the plot is that a planet is swinging through our solar system and it's going to crash with Earth. And, you know, that's not, you know, the case here. But there's some really great photography in there, really scary. You know, go check it out. It really started me thinking, you know, what's going to be happening here when that planet swings by? So, you know, Melancholia, go check it out on imdb.com if you want to see a trailer that's really, really interesting. And, you know, a big thanks again to Terrell for coming on and getting this information out. And another thanks to my producer and sometimes co-host, who is not with me this week, but the notorious BGB, thanks to him. And planet is going to be making a very close pass to our planet very soon. And, you know, to discuss this compelling evidence, I am going to have on Terral. He is a researcher and an expert on this evidence, and we'll be talking about what we can expect, what some of the signs are, and how we can take steps to try and survive. So let me get Terral on the line for you. Terral, can you hear me? Hello?
Hello, Nixie.
Fantastic. How are you doing today?
Great. How are you? Mic check. Am I coming in good?
Yes, I can hear you very, very good. Okay, so we did a show last week, and I really encourage everyone who missed that show, maybe, go back and take a listen to that one first, because today, I just kind of, I don't want to have to go through the whole explanation of, how our solar system is and everything, once again. I mean, we'll go over it, of course, but, because just the background information took so long last week, and there's a lot more information to get out. I don't want to, basically have a repeat of what we already talked about. So, obviously, so anyone who missed the first show, you may be a little behind on the learning curve, so to speak. So if you're having questions, if you're listening, or you feel like you're not caught up, really go back and listen to the other show first. And what I want to talk about is something that happened last week too. So if you want to explain a little bit about the trajectory of what this object is, and also how it's affecting the solar system. For example, this massive sun flare or solar flare that we had last week, and what that tells you, and what, if any, are the signs that we've already seen from Saturn.
Okay. Well, first of all, Ellie is still in the southern hemisphere. That's why we got the flare from the south side of the sun. And it worried me that it came this early in the timeline. I didn't expect that. And so that is a troubling sign, but hopefully we don't get another until later in the timeline. Saturn passed between the sun and Ellie and developed an extra ring, and also it's caused a superstorm. So the Saturn had an event like we had with Japan, where its axis shifted, and where it had quakes, and then that showed up as a superstorm on the sun, on Saturn right now. Then on 7/7 coming up, then Ellie's going to pass between the sun and Saturn on July the 7th coming up. So we're watching Saturn for signs that Ellie is trying to wrestle polarity control from the sun. So if you would like me to, in 1 minute, I'll go down the timeline briefly and just do the major stuff so somebody can catch up.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, on the May 11th is the day that the Earth passed through the gravity trough connecting the two stars. That's the day we had the Japan quake. That's the day Earth axis shifted 4 inches, and the day Earth aquifers all shifted. On April 25th, that's the day that that we crossed Ellie orbit, and we got locked at 1.8 AU. 1 AU is 1 astronomical unit. It's about 93 million miles. So we've been locked in orbit at about 170 million miles since April the 25th until today, and that's going to continue until after the alignment. At the alignment on July the 7th, we're still 1.74 AU away. So you see, we're like those two sailboats heading in the same direction. We're on the outside, Ellie's on the inside, and Ellie's not able to get any closer. The next key date is, we'll skip down to September 11th. That's the day of perigee. That's the day that Ellie is nearest the sun. It's the day that Ellie passes from the southern hemisphere to the northern hemisphere. It's the day of maximum velocity. The next important day is September 26th, very important day. The reason the Russians think this object is controlled is because Ellie appears to be flying through a 9/11 window. That allows Ellie and the Earth to be both on the celestial plane on September the 26th. That places Ellie in perfect position to break the magnetic portals connecting the sun and the Earth together and to wrestle polarity control from the sun. After that, the next important day is November 22nd, where we have another alignment like 3/11 of this year with the Japan quake, except for this time, Ellie's only about half the distance of the sun away. So by then, the problem is that Earth magma is going to be super hot, and we can have Japan-like events all over the planet.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I want to mention, I know we did mention this on the last show as well, but because you mentioned it, and it was a question I had last time, and certainly I'm sure other people will have that because of what you're saying. So if this planet tries to, wrestle control from the sun, is it possible that, I mean, I understand the sun is, gigantic, so I don't think it will be able to, but just to, kind of calm everyone, do you think it will be able to wrestle the Earth from its orbit into its own orbit, or send us, spinning off?
No, the sun is much too large. Ellie's been trying to wrestle polarity control from the sun since 2004, whenever those magnetic portals were connected to us. That's the reason that we've had the magnetic problems with the animal deaths and things. Mm-hmm. And so that's going to be magnified on October the 17th, when Ellie is at the nearest point of the encounter, and the dwarf star is actually passing in front of us. So there's connected to this object is a deep V-shaped gravity well. And so Earth is going to be trying to fall into that, and Ellie's going to have polarity control for about 10 days from the 26th onward, you see, leading up to this event. So Ellie's getting closer and closer to us as that's happening. But Ellie's going to go on by, and the sun is going to wrestle polarity control back, and overcompensate. The sun's very, very large, and so I see no tail as far as like a comet has a tail associated with this. There can be an asteroid belt, but I'm not concerned about impact with anything. I'm more concerned about the gravitational effect and the magnetic effect, what's going to happen. Then in the spring, I expect to have a near orbit. In other words, we're going to have a straight orbit. The sun's going to overcompensate for Ellie trying to pull us out, and the sun's going to snatch us back. And so that, like a straight line, rather than a round elliptical orbit, we're going to have a straight orbit for the spring, and then we're going to have a wide orbit in the summer because of that overcompensation. Because the sun is going to be overcompensating for what Ellie's trying to do. So if you want to imagine, it's like the sun's having a wrestling contest, arm wrestling contest with this other star. And it's that wrestling contest that is causing the magnetic poles to migrate, because Ellie's trying to do one thing to us and the sun is trying to stand us back up, you see.
Sure.
So that's what's going on with the magnetic poles. And the magnetic north is being affected more than the magnetic south, but all of that is caused by the sun reacting to what this star is doing to us, you see.
And another question I have too is if there is some compensation, overcompensation, if there's some even slight change in the Earth's orbit, would that or could that possibly throw us out of the so-called Goldilocks zone?
The Earth is definitely going to be moving out of orbit, but then there's going to be a compensation period that's going to last for more than a year as we gradually, our relationship